Hello and welcome to Author Talk. I'm your host, Cody Weatherington, and today we're here with Hawkinsville author Judy Churchwell. Miss Judy, how are you today?
Fine, thank you, Cody.
Well, we are thrilled to have Miss Judy on the show today, as she is a Hawkinsville native, and she's written the book Tales from the Hotel, which is about the Hotel Hawkinsville that her family owned. Miss Judy, tell us a little about yourself.
Well, I'm married to Harris Churchwell. He is also a writer. He writes some Civil War books. The 12th Georgia Regiment. I grew up in Hawkinsville, and I lived here until I married in 1970. I married a Vienna boy, Harris Churchwell. Before that, I went away to college to Middle Tennessee State University, and I got a degree as an English major and a speech minor.
Wow.
And then, as years passed on, my husband and I both retired. And my mother at the time was living at Kingford Place, and we decided that we would move back to Hawkinsville because his mother was also living there. And we thought it would be helpful to spend some of their last days with them, as we had not been able to do so much of that in the past.
Now, what did you retire from? What did you do initially?
I taught 7th grade English in Warner
Okay.
Robins, Georgia.
Awesome.
And then we moved to Atlanta. And as indicated in my book, later I switched gears a little bit and I started teaching English as a second language to
Okay.
adults. And
Awesome.
it's fascinating teaching. I had sometimes as many as maybe 15 to 25 students from all over the world in one classroom.
Awesome.
The main thing, they all needed to learn English.
Yes, ma'am.
So,
What was your favorite part about teaching?
well, going back to 7th grade, I enjoyed the students. Not having children, I sort of felt like they were my children, and I got
Yes,
to
ma'am.
enjoy them and say goodbye and come back the next day, and there they were again. So I liked that. And I truly enjoyed teaching English as a second language because I met some wonderful people from all different countries.
Yes, ma'am.
Very enjoyable.
Where did you teach the English as a second language class? Is that an
Well,
adult learning center or
It's
something like that?
these were, I always taught adults.
Yes, ma'am.
And I taught at Gwinnett Technical School,
Okay.
DeKalb Technical School, and I also went into private companies where workers may need to know, have knowledge of the English language. I would just go there and teach them. So I taught several different locations.
Yes, ma'am. Okay. Now, did you do any writing before you got back to Hawkinsville, or was this the first time you sat down to write a book, or had you thought of the idea beforehand?
Well, no, I had not done much writing. I had a little story. One of the stories that's in my book, The Eggs, was published in a magazine, an Atlanta magazine, which is now out of publication. But no, I had not actually ever thought about writing a book. And it's kind of interesting how this came about. Only in a little town, I think, would this happen. But I was at the steakhouse one Friday afternoon, and one of the ladies came to the table and said, "You have a phone call." And I said, "Who knows I'm here?" And she said, "It's the Dispatch News." And so I went to the phone, and this boy said, "Would you be interested in writing a series of newspaper articles about what it's like to grow up in a hotel?" And I said, "Yes, I would be happy to do that." So I think it was 3 different issues in the Dispatch. And they asked stories, and I shared some of the ones, a few that are in my book. And after the newspaper came out, I had a number of phone calls, and people were asking me to write a book. They said, "Why don't you take these stories and put them in a book?"
Yes, ma'am.
And Cody, I said, "Well, you know, I never really thought about writing the book, but, well, maybe I could." So I wrote the first edition, Tales from the Hotel, and that went over fairly well. I started out with 50 copies, and then as the demand grew, I had my publisher print 50 more and 50 more. And one day I was at the Opera House, and a lady came up to me and she said, "I know you know more stories, print them." And so I went home and I said, "Harris, I wonder if I know any more stories, maybe." And I said, "I have an idea. This is what I'll do. I'll have the publisher continue to publish the book, same title, same stories, but we'll add some new stories. And we'll print those stories in the book all at the same price, $13. Don't increase the price, just give them a little bit more." And it's been quite a fun job to publish this book. Enjoyed
Awesome.
it a lot.
Awesome.
Hawkinsville has been very good to both Harris and myself
Yes, ma'am.
about publishing not publishing, but purchasing our books.
Yes, ma'am. Now, you alluded to it. Hawkinsville is a small town and a very tight-knit community. Talk
Correct.
about growing up in that type of environment and then moving off to a bigger environment like Atlanta and living in Warner Robins.
Quite different, quite different. When Harris and I married in 1970, we first moved to Perry, and after that, a few years after that, we did move to Atlanta. We lived in several towns. We lived in Snellville, Conyers, Carrollton. But the hardest thing for me to get used to was the traffic. There used to be a jewelry store years ago in Atlanta named Elman's, and I used to get their catalog and order, and I told my husband, I said, oh, this is exciting. I'm going to drive to Elman's. I get to go in and go shopping. And so I said, I think I'll just mosey over to Elman's. He said, wait a minute, you're not in Hawkinsville anymore. You don't mosey in Atlanta. When you get on the interstate, you don't mosey. You will get run over. And I said, well, do you think I could get there? And he said, sure, just get in the car and go. Well, he was at work. And that afternoon, just before 5, I called him at work and I said, Harris, thank God I'm alive. And he said, what's happened? I said, well, you know, I went to Elman's and I passed the state capitol 3 times before I got home. He said, well, you're just going to have to do it over and over till you get it down pat. And then later, I actually took a job on Jimmy Carter Boulevard
Wow.
part-time, which is very busy as well.
Yes, ma'am.
It took some getting used to.
That's
a
awesome.
lot of getting used to.
Yes, ma'am. Talk about coming home. What was that like for you to leave the hustle and bustle and come back to the quiet town? Was that what you guys initially planned to do?
It was interesting. It was different. But I'm glad that we made the move back to Hawkinsville. My mother had a lot of friends that I knew still living, that I enjoyed, and I have a few friends that I graduated with that live here. Not a lot, but a few. And yes, it's nice to go in restaurants and in places and people know you.
Yes, ma'am.
They knew my mother, they knew my family. It's wonderful.
Yes, ma'am. It is. It is.
Well, in fact, Cody, I've had people come to me and say, now just tell me the truth. Are these stories for real? And I would always give the same answer. I am not smart enough to make this up. They're all genuine stories. You see, Cody, these are stories that I witnessed as a young girl growing up in the hotel, mainly snooping around the hotel lobby. That was the most fun thing I ever did. There was always activity going on there in the hotel. So it was, actually I had taken note of more things than I ever dreamed I had. When I sat down to write the book, more and more memories, vivid memories, just flowed that I had forgotten all about. So it's really quite easy once I got started writing the book to actually write the stories the way I recall them.
Absolutely. Talk about growing up in that hotel environment, people in and out, and people working there at the hotel. What was that like?
Interesting. We had some guests who lived in the hotel year-round. One of those is mentioned in my book, Link Fleming. That was his home, just like it was our home. And I remember one man got off the Greyhound bus one day. Incidentally, we had the hotel, the bus station, and the Western Union all at once, so it was a very busy spot. And one day I remember a man got off the bus, looked around and said, this looks like a pretty nice town. I think I'll just live here. So he checked in the hotel and lived there for years. His name was Earl Moore. He's from up north. I've forgotten exactly where, but anyway, it was like a family situation to me.
Absolutely.
I could go out in the lobby and I could talk to Mr. Moore and Link Fleming, and I loved the clerks that we had. It was a very enjoyable experience, and to say the least, I was never lonely. We had an apartment in the back, and I would walk up into the lobby. There was always some action, people coming and going.
Sounds like it was very unique.
It was unique. You know, Cody, I never realized that it was unique when I was living there. Only when I went away to college, and I mentioned to some of my friends in the dorm that I grew up in a hotel, and they were fascinated. They said, "This is neat," and I said, "What do you mean neat? It's just the way I live." And once you went back in our apartment, you would be at the front and walk straight to the back. It was a nice apartment. It was like a setting like anybody's home. We had a dining room, living room, den, bedrooms, everything,
Wow.
kitchen, everything you would have in a regular home. So I just thought of it, Cody, as that was my home. I never once entertained the idea other people lived in this hotel from the time it was built in 1908 on. I just thought of it was, this is my home.
Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. Another unique aspect was your mother was the one that ran the hotel.
Exactly.
Talk about your mother owning a hotel in a time where business owners were mostly male.
Right. My mother was a very strong woman. She was an extraordinary businesswoman. She was strong, and that running a business, I think in the 50s, you see, my father was killed in a car accident in 1956 when I was 11. And she took over, or she actually ran it in the day anyway. He worked at Robbins Air Force Base. But after he died, she continued to own and operate the hotel. But I think it must have been a challenge. It wasn't difficult for Mama because she was strong. But I think it would have been a challenge for most women to own a business on Commerce Street.
Absolutely.
Although there were dress shops and other businesses, I think it was mainly, a lot of them were male operated and
Yes,
owned.
ma'am. And having the Western Union and the Greyhound
bus
and it being
station.
so busy.
Very busy.
Talk about the staff you guys used to have there.
Well, we had day clerks and night clerks.
Right.
They each had shifts. Of course, the night shift was lighter. The daytime wasn't much activity. In the daytime, the clerks would have to know how to send telegrams and rent rooms. And of course, at night, you didn't have that activity. The Greyhound bus station still stopped there, ran through the night, but basically the night clerk's duties were just for those who checked in. And we had, throughout my life, I got to learn a lot of people who came as salesmen to the hotel. Maybe every week or every 2 weeks, we had Mr. Jones, who we called the cigar man, and he would come and bring cigarettes, cigars, candies. And then we had Mr. Bradbury came twice a year with, his job was to go to the schools and sell class rings. We looked forward to seeing him, although it was just a couple of times a year. But we got to know a lot of the people
Yes,
that
ma'am.
frequented the hotel, and those, of course, who lived there full time.
The hotel being, like you say, built in 1908, obviously there are a lot of interesting little factoids about the building and about the hotel. Share some of those interesting facts about the hotel.
Well, it was actually built in 1908, as you said. It was named at that time the New Pulaski Hotel.
Wow.
And when my parents bought it in 1946, I was about a year and a half, and they renamed it the Hotel Hawkinsville. And I wish I had asked my mother why they decided to change the name, because I thought the New Pulaski Hotel had kind of a ring like the New Perry Hotel. But of course I was just a year and a half and they didn't ask me. They just changed it. And it still is today the Hotel Hawkinsville. Although a lot of times people would turn that around a little, and when they would call, they would say, "Is this the Hawkinsville Hotel?" Rather, same thing, but
Right.
a little bit different.
Yes.
Originally, Cody, the hotel was built to be an office building in 1908, but that never occurred. It went right to being a hotel.
Well, it is an office building now, so I guess, 100
Well-
years later it came to
Well, actually,
fruition.
all that we have in the hotel today is, I don't know if you can see this from my book, but on this side, right over here at the bottom is H&R Block.
Right.
They rent it year-round now.
Right.
And on the far side, let's see here, over on this side, there's now a barbershop there, which used to
Right.
be Colonel Jackson's law office.
Right.
And I'm sure many people, if they're tuned into this channel today, will remember Colonel Jackson as being a fine lawyer.
Yes,
He had that office and rented that from my mother for many, many years. And also you'll see, if you can see from my book, Cafe. printed here. For years we had a nice restaurant here, white tablecloths, and people would come there on Sundays and have their Sunday meal. But my mother also rented it for different things. I guess I'm old-fashioned, but I used to call these washaterias at one time. Laundromat, I think, is the current name for it. At one time, there was a laundromat here. At one time, there was temporarily a bank was here. But my fondest memories are from Miss Janet Scarborough's dress shop, which was right here where the cafe sign is. She had a dress shop. And any of you who have read my book, and you've read it, Cody, will remember the story of the mannequin,
Right.
the joke that we played on one of our
Right.
renters, whereas Janet Scarborough gave me the mannequin. When she sold out her business, I said, do you mind if I have that head? And she also had feet, painted toenails and all. She had that as a display in her shop. And I knew right what I was going to do with it. And you read the story, Cody, so you know how I used that mannequin in my book.
Now that is one of the more funny stories of the book.
I'll be honest with you, Cody, it is the favorite story of the book, the very favorite story for most people.
Yes, ma'am.
But again, it was a true story and happened exactly as I expressed it in the book, as I witnessed it.
Now, back in that time, there was a lot of superstition that maybe doesn't go on today. Another
Correct.
interesting fact about the hotel is it does not have a room
Exactly.
13.
Yes.
Why is that?
Well, Cody, my mother always said we have 50 rooms in the hotel, but no room 13. And I think it's because people might be suspicious that 13 is a number that is unlucky. I grew up in the time where we talked about superstitions a good bit. I remember people throwing salt from a salt shaker over their shoulder. I think that was for good luck. And they would say, oh, there's a black cat that crossed in front. Different things like this that people were, I don't know that they were afraid of. But I guess the most well-known today is this, for good luck, you know.
Yeah, right. Now, you initially wrote this book for your family. What made you want to put it out there for the public?
Well, I guess because I had so many people after, I think we mentioned earlier about the newspaper article, people were nudging me to write the book. Now, several years before I wrote the book, I was at Kingford Place, and my mother asked me to one day, she said, I hope one day you'll write about the old hotel. And I just sort of laughed it off. I never really thought I would. But I'm sorry she didn't live to see the book and know that I fulfilled her wish.
Right. Yes, ma'am. Where can we get the book now?
You can find the book. We have copies at our home. We have autographed I have autographed copies of my book at the Dispatch and News. And also, there are autographed copies of Harris's two books at the Hawkinsville Dispatch and News.
Awesome.
And we do ship our books anywhere in the United States for a small fee, $3. and we have shipped out many to different states of Harris's books, and quite a few of mine by people reading the articles in the Dispatch and learning that I have written a book about this wonderful historic hotel.
We definitely have a treat for our viewers this afternoon. Miss Churchwell is going to share one of her favorite and one of my favorite stories from the book about Magnolia.
Yes. Okay.
All right. Whenever you're ready.
All right, Cody, thank you. This is a treat for me. I have done a lot of book talks,
Yes, ma'am.
as well as Harris, and I usually read 2 short stories from the book. This is one of the ones that I like to read. And
What
we'll
makes this your favorite story to read?
Well, I'm not really sure. I guess because it involved one of my very favorite day clerks, Lucius Anderson. And many people that are viewing this will remember her. She was a wonderful, wonderful lady. And we shared a lot of fun together. We delivered telegrams together. When Frank, our bellhop's bicycle was missing, he left it somewhere and forgotten where. And so she would drive me in her old Plymouth. And we delivered telegrams, and we shared a lot of wonderful experiences. And there are actually 2 characters in the story. One character is Lucius Anderson, and then the other is a gentleman who comes in to buy a bus ticket. So I'm going to name this story the Magnolia Story, Cody.
All right.
And it goes this way. When Mama decided to undertake the operation of the Western Union and the Greyhound bus station, our hotel became one of the busiest establishments in Hawkinsville. My brothers and I had to learn how to send telegrams, sell bus tickets, and rent rooms. We had to refer to a gigantic schedule book when pricing tickets. The book contained listings of every town and every bus stop in every state. One day after we had received the schedule book, a soft-spoken elderly gentleman shuffled up to the counter, removed his hat, and gingerly announced, "I want a one-way ticket for Magnolia." Mrs. Anderson, eager to help, began carefully thumbing through the big book for listings of towns in the Georgia section. When she didn't see a Magnolia listed, she questioned, "You say you want a ticket for Magnolia?" With a big nod, the old man replied emphatically, "Yes'm, the ticket is for Magnolia." She then began to carefully spell out each letter. Magnolia. That's right, insisted the persistent man. "Well, we'll search further. If it's in here, we'll find it," she said with a reassuring voice. She then began to slowly search throughout the entire book in quest of finding Magnolia. She relentlessly hunted state by state. When at last she came to the ending of the listings, she threw up both hands in frustration and concluded with an exasperating voice, "There is no Magnolia. Where in the world is Magnolia?" "Magnolia?" the man questioned. "Oh, she's waiting outside."
Oh, it sounds like you guys definitely met some very colorful people
We did.
at the hotel.
We did.
Talk about some more of your favorite people at the hotel and why. Just briefly about. Let me start that over. It sounds like you guys had some very colorful guests and interesting guests at the hotel. Talk about some of your favorite interesting people that stayed at the hotel.
Well, of course, as I mentioned, Mrs. Lucius Anderson, Ms. Rural A. Anderson, was by far my favorite for several reasons. One, every day when she reported for duty, she wore a beautiful flower on her lapel from her yard. Beautiful. And I asked her one day, I said, "Why do you I'm not a flower person." And I said, "Why do you always wear flowers?" And she said, "Because they look right at my flower and say, 'Oh, how pretty you look today.'" And along with that, she used to bring an extra flower and put it in a vase. Now, Harling Elliott Hickman, that I fondly nicknamed Hickey, was a character. And you'll read about Hickman, who claimed to be kin to Dwayne Hickman from the TV series about Dobie Gillis. He was quite a joker along with the rest of us. And I know one day Mrs. Anderson brought a fresh flower, put it in her vase, and he decided to play a trick on her. So he removed the vase and put some glue on the counter and glued the vase to the counter. And eventually the next day when she changed the flower, she tried to pick up the vase to put fresh water in the vase and tore part of the countertop. Needless to say, Mama was not amused.
Well, we certainly had a great time here today, and we hope you did as well. We hope you will pick up a copy of Tales from the Hotel, either from the Dispatch and News or from Ms. Churchwell. Ms. Churchwell, is there anything you'd like to add?
No, our books, Harris and my books at the Dispatch are all signed, but sometimes people like to have their book have a little message to such and such person, personalized. They like their book personalized, so if they would like that, we can do that. But it's been my pleasure, Cody, to be here today.
Absolutely.
You've asked some interesting questions, some comfortable questions that were easy for me to answer, and I thank you so much for inviting me to come.
Well, we thank you for being a part of Author Talk, and until next time, viewers, this has been Author Talk.